In the spirit of familiarizing ourselves with BBEdit, we should really take a look at the interface. And it hasn't changed much in all of its years. However, there's more to it than meets the eye. And knowing where everything lives is going to make the rest of the video a lot easier to follow. So we're going to work from top to bottom. And like almost all macOS applications, you can right click on the title up here to be presented with the folder path that gets you there. And you can go to those different folders. And then below that, we have the navigation bar. Now this is where BBEdit starts doing things that other text editors don't. So on the far left, we have the gear icon, and this opens up what BBEdit calls the text options popover. And it's worth spending a moment here because we've got editing options on the left where we can use things like typographer's quotes, we can auto expand our tabs, but this soft wrap text is an option you're going to be enabling more often than not. If you look over here in the main document, you can see the text is going off the end of the page. Some of the text is sitting here in what's called the page guide. Well, if I click on the gear icon and select soft wrap text, we can see that by default it wraps the text at that page guide. You can also wrap the text to the full width of the window, or you can wrap it to just 80 characters. There are some other wrap options which we're going to look at later on, but I'm just going to turn this off. Now, when you press the tab key, you can determine how many spaces each indentation makes. And there's also a tail mode, which is useful if you're watching the file that's continually updating, like a log file. You will always see the very bottom of that file, and you won't have to continually keep scrolling and scrolling to the bottom to see the end of it. Over here, you'll see that you can turn off the line numbers. You can turn off the gutter, which is just to the right of those numbers. And this can be useful if you have any kind of folded text because it contains those little markers here that you can click to unfold and fold accordingly. Then if we go back in, you'll see you can turn that page guide off if you don't want to see it. And enabling tab stops here shows some grid lines just behind so you can visually see where every tab indentation is going to take you. And whilst most word processors have show invisibles, of course, TextEdit isn't a word processor as such. So it's nice to see it, and you can also be a little bit more granular and only show a combination of spaces, tabs, or line breaks. Next, we have the currently open documents drop-down, and if you click it, every file that you have opened in BBEdit is right there. Now, a lot of experienced BBEdit users navigate entirely through this drop-down, and they never touch this sidebar over here on the left at all. Then next, we have the function menu, and this one is going to become one of your favorite things in BBEdit. So if you click on this, you'll see every heading within Alex's review document here. They're going to appear as a list, and if you click on any one of them, then BBEdit is going to jump straight there. Now, in a document this size, that's useful, but in a 10,000 word manuscript, it can be essential. And don't even get me started on how useful this is for a very long passage of code. Now, if you want to set individual markers, which are just like bookmarks, really, you can do that via this drop-down. And if you need to revert back to a previous version of the document, they're going to sit underneath here, because as you saw earlier, we enabled saving straight away. Now, you might be forgiven for walking straight past this button, but this is related files. And when you click it, BBEdit will show you files that are contextually linked to whatever you're currently editing. So at the bottom, I can see other files that are currently in the folder that houses this one. However, if I was in an HTML file, then BBEdit would show at the top the CSS style sheet that is currently being referenced. If I was in a C++ source file, it would find the header file. So it understands the relationship between files automatically. To the right of that, we have a document status icon where we can rename the file. And below that, you can see we've got some tabs for information. We can view and modify the permissions. We can see some statistics related to the text, as well as the metadata for the file as well. Then the reveal button, if needed, is going to show the file's location within Finder. Over on the far left, we have the sidebar, which shows everything that's currently open in BBEdit. Just click on any file to switch to it. And it's essentially the same as the navigation bar drop-down, just in a different place. Some people live in the sidebar, others never open it, but BBEdit gives you both options. You can close files with the X on the far right. Let me just show you something quickly. If I just start typing some text in here, we can see this X has changed colors slightly. It's only small, but if I click elsewhere, you can see it a bit more prominently there. And this is just telling me that if I close this, there have been some changes that have been made but not saved. If I now press Command and S to save, it changes color again. A very small detail, but really nice to have. Now, if you do use the sidebar, you're probably going to want to mess about with the sort order, which you can do with this drop down. So it can be ordered alphabetically or reverse alphabetically, and then you can have most recently changed or least recently changed, and then the same for when the file was opened. I tend to find that most recently changed is what I go for. Now over here in the main window, of course, we have the most valuable component, the text itself. And then down towards the bottom, we have this status bar. And there's a lot of information down here as well. So on the far left, we have the cursor position. It's currently in line 1, column 3. But as I click around the document, you'll see that value change. Then to the right of that, we have the language selector. The default is set to automatic, and I've never really had to deviate from that. BBEdit is really good at detecting what language the document you're currently working on is. And if I scroll towards the bottom, you'll see there's over 50 languages that can be used. And every one of these will display slightly differently. So if I go for CSS here, you can see that the component CSS is detecting a different. It doesn't work in the same way as Markdown does, so it highlights certain text differently. If I change the language now to PHP, something I work in quite a bit, you can see that changes again. As said, I tend to use automatic all the time. Then to the right of the language selector, we have the file encoding selector, and it tells you how BBEdit interprets the characters in this file and lets you change it. So for almost everything you'll ever do on a Mac, UTF-8 is exactly what you want. It's a universal standard that handles every language, every symbol, and every emoji. Then directly to the right of that, we have the line break type pop-up. So every time you press return, your computer inserts an invisible character to mark the end of that line. The problem is that Mac, Windows, and old classic Mac systems all use a different character to do it. And when a file created on one system gets opened on another, those line endings can be misread. So Unix LF is what macOS uses natively, whereas Windows uses CR-LF, so 2 characters instead of 1. And then the legacy Mac is the old classic Mac format from before OS X, which you'll rarely encounter, but BBEdit can handle it perfectly. The saved indicator here tells us when that last save was, and the document stats for how many characters, words, etc. we can see those here, and clicking is just the same as what we saw at the top. Now the status item to the right doesn't have a value at the moment. However, if I select a word, let's say screenshot here, you can see down here we've got the number 4, and that's saying that this word appears 4 times within the document. So if you're writing and you don't want to overuse a word, this is a nice little indicator to have. Then of course, on the right we have the zoom level, so the default is 100%, but you can change it to whatever you feel is necessary here. BBEdit also comes with a split bar that divides the window into 2 independent panes, both looking at the same document. So at the bottom here, if I want to come down and work in the key features section, I can move to a different section at the top if I need to refer to it at any point, and it doesn't impact anything at the bottom at all. And then to remove the split bar, all I need to do is just click and then drag it back to the top again. Now that we're familiar with the interface, let's take a look at how to create new files. And there's a couple of ways to do this. So I'll come up to File, then down to New. We can open up a new text document or press Command and N. And you can see this adds a new document to the bottom of the list on our sidebar. And it's just called Untitled Text. Then I can press Command and S to save. I can give it a name and then just save it wherever I like. And then to close the file, press Command and W just like any other application. What I can also do, if I come up to File here, then New, I can create a new text window. And you can see this opens up a new text document, but also in a new window. which you can drag about and use in conjunction with any other BBEdit windows you have open. Now you can change the default behavior for how text documents open by going into Settings, then up here in Application, and the top checkbox is Open Documents into the front window when possible. If you don't want this, just uncheck it. Now here's something BBEdit does that most text editors simply don't. Let's make a few changes here. I'm just going to fold these lines, and then I'm going to place the cursor at the bottom of the document. Now if I close this and then reopen it, I think I'm going to come up to my Related Files button here to do that, because I can see the file listed down here. So I'll select it, and we can see it's kept those changes. My cursor's at the bottom, ready to carry on typing. As most of you who work with Markdown will know, formatting your text requires placing a delimiter at the beginning and end of that text. We can see it clearly here in this file. We have one asterisk before the status line and at the end, which means it's going to be italicized. Where there's two asterisks, that means that text is going to be bolded. And there's more Markdown syntax there. And for an overview of how to use Markdown, check out Alison's video in the show description. Now, BBEdit makes it easy to place those delimiters. If I double click on this text here, I'll press Shift and 8 to put an asterisk in, and you can see it's automatically wrapped the beginning and end of that selection. I'll just undo that. And it works with almost any delimiters that would function as a pair. So for example, on a major paid upgrade here, if I just press Shift and 9 to put in a left open bracket, it automatically closes the bracket on the right. If I select this text here and put in a set of quotation marks, there's a closing set of quotation marks as well. Same works for backticks, for curly brackets, you name it.